What's up, my wizards? Dev, SBMTG, we like magic down there, all that stuff, and today we're going to talk about Lifegain, a much maligned strategy in our community. It seems everywhere you turn, there's a more experienced player telling you that Lifegain is bad and you should stop. Quit trying to make it work because it doesn't. But turns out that we're in a rare moment in Standard right now where Lifegain might actually be a viable strategy. So let me take you through it. Now, in order to do that, I need to devote some time here at the beginning of the video to talking about what not to do when you're building your Lifegain deck. Because I think there are a number of traps involved in building this thing right now in Standard. Like, the first thing you don't want to do is play bad Lifegain spells. There are a lot of these in Standard right now, things that might look good at first glance, like Sanguine Sacrament or Healing Grace, even Renewed Faith, but these are all the bad Lifegain cards because they don't do anything to advance your board position whatsoever. And outside of a creature or two on your opponent's side hitting you, they really don't do anything to change the game state whatsoever. Sometimes they don't even negate the damage of a whole creature hitting you. So these are often just worse than Fog, and Fog is a pretty bad card in its own right. So these are the cards people are talking about when they tell you that Lifegain is bad. Don't play them. Another thing that I don't think you should do when building this deck is include a black splash, which I know is a little contentious to some of the people watching this video, but in the end, come to believe it's a mistake. There are some good payoffs in black, things like Nightmare's Thirst. This is actually maybe the best payoff for gaining life in black right now, believe it or not. Nightmare's Thirst is actually pretty okay in my book. But as far as the other stuff, things like, say, Epicure of Blood, this is just 1 point of damage whenever we gain any amount of life. And if it just did damage equal to the amount of life we gained, then maybe we'd be talking this and Sanguine Sacrament. Yeah, that might be a real deck to build. But as it is, no matter what amount of life we gain, this does a whole 1 damage, which I'm just not sure can actually finish out a game for us. And Regal Bloodlord is another payoff in black, but this isn't even every time we gain life. This is once a turn we might get a bat. That's it. It's just not good enough, especially at a 5-mana raid. Now, there's multiple reasons I think this deck is viable right now. One of them is because mono red is kind of everywhere. This deck performs really well against mono red, so there's that. But another big reason is because we actually have a ton of really good payoffs for playing Lifegain right now, which isn't always the case, or it's pretty much never the case for the most part. Usually the way Lifegain decks play is like gain life, this is fun, run out of gas, I'm dead on attacks. That's often how things work, is that they just peter out once they run out of cards, they can't get any more life. What are you going to do? But we actually have a ton of finishers right now that are actually really, really good. So let's run through those real quick, starting with the real All-Stars, 4 copies of Crested Sunmare, and a whole 4 copies of Resplendent Angel. Gotta play the horse? Of course. You need to see it because not only are there more and better ways to gain life than there ever have been the whole time Sunmare's been in Standard, but we also get access to more horses than we've had access to the whole time Sunmare's been in Standard. We get to play like 7 other horses in this deck for this to make indestructible, so even though there's only a couple of months until it rotates, it sucks that it gets really, really good right before it rotates out of Standard, but for the next 2 or 3 months while we can still play it, the horse is in tip-top prime racing condition. And even though Resplendent Angel is 5 times harder to get a token off of than Crested Sunmare, we still play all 4 despite the price, which is trending downwards if it makes you feel any better. So there's that. But we still play all 4 copies because it's just another crazy bomb finisher that usually Lifegain decks don't have access to. This can close a game in a hurry, whether you get it on curve or you rip it off the top. It's great flood protection. It's something to do with our mana. We don't have a lot of mana sinks in this deck, but we do want a relatively high land count. So on turns where we get a land off the top on turn 9 or 10 or whatever, this is a great way to spend our mana. It triggers itself, yes, but there are a number of other ways to actually get to that 5 life without Resplendent Angel ever having to swing in or activate. But that's not all. We've got good Lifegain payoffs all over the place right now, including some spots lower on the curve. So we're going to play all 4 copies of both Famish Paladin and Johnny's Primate in the deck. Now, Paladin might not look like much, but this is another above-curve creature. 2 mana for a 3/3 is pushed by anybody's standards, and this actually has good game against a variety of very different decks right now. Against Control and other slow-to-start decks, this is an early threat that's relatively fat and gets in very quick damage, and they have to care about. That's always welcome. But against the aggro decks in the format, this just brick walls any early drop that they play, and can even go toe-to-toe and trade with some of their later drops. So this is just good against 2 of the better decks in Standard that couldn't be more different from one another, so it's great to have a piece that, in a way, is this versatile. But the real fat cat is obviously a Johnny's Primate. The cat has finally come back to standard after a relatively lengthy absence, but it's awesome to have it back. If they let our Johnny's Primate get to 4-4 or 5-5 while they're dealing with our angels and our horses, then they've still got a real problem on their hands, and they've used most of their removal. So a Johnny's Primate is another creature your opponent absolutely has to pay attention to, or it's going to get way too big for them to handle. But in order to make all of those Lifegain payoffs actually pay off in the first place, we've got to play a bunch of cards that gain us life, whether we want to or not. But luckily, we've got access to a bunch of really good cards that do that right now, and we're playing a total of 22 different cards in the deck that gain us life, not even counting Resplendent Angel, which can also gain us life, by the way. But let's start at the low end of the curve on these, with 3 copies of Fountain of Renewal and 3 copies of Diamond Mare. Now, I won't say that we need playsets of either one of these, because I think that every other slot in the deck is used better than a 4th copy of either one of these cards, but they're still better than I initially assumed they would be, especially Fountain of Renewal, which is way better than I anticipated. This is effectively a 1-mana investment, sometimes as early as turn 1, to get a free Lifegain trigger every single turn after that. That'll get you a horse every turn, that'll untap Famish Paladin every turn, that'll get a Johnny's Primate, a guaranteed counter every turn. That's, a life off of Resplendent Angels, 5 life cost every single turn. This just does so much in this deck at the cost of just 1 whole mana, and can even convert into a card a little bit later if you get extra copies. But sometimes having multiple copies of this out is great too. And I even like Diamond Mare more than I thought I would like it, because this turns spells that wouldn't normally gain us life into spells that do gain us life. We cast a Resplendent Angel, and then suddenly we're putting a counter on our Primate if we've got a Diamond Mare in play. It can also turn like Primates and Paladins that you draw late into the game into horses if you've got a Crested Sunmare out, and that's a pretty good deal too. It's just, again, it turns spells that wouldn't normally gain you life into Lifegain triggers, which is amazing. But moving up the curve a little bit, I'm playing playsets of both Shieldmare and Sunscourge Champion, because these are some of the best cards in the deck. Both of these will guarantee either a 3-3 Primate or an untapped Paladin on turn 3. They also both trigger Crested Sunmare in and of themselves, like that about them, but they're also kind of good for getting that angel off of a Resplendent Angel sometimes. Like, for instance, with Shieldmare, let's say you have a Resplendent out, and then any combination of Fountains or Diamond Mares. You could have one of each, Fountain of Renewal and a Diamond Mare. Maybe you have 2 Fountains and you've already gained 2 life that turn. Maybe you have 2 Diamond Mares and you gain 2 life when you cast a Shieldmare. But either way, congratulations, you've gained 5 life that turn. You have earned yourself an angel. In Sunscourge Champion, you only need to gain 1 more life when you eternalize this out of your graveyard. It'll gain you 4 life when it comes back into play, and let's say you have a Fountain of Renewal. Well, again, you've gained 5 life. You have earned an angel. But these are also helped out by just being good cards in their own right. You might be tempted to look at these and say, oh, they're just both 3-mana 2/3s. That's not what you want to be doing in Standard. But they also have great enter the battlefield triggers gaining life. It's nothing to sneeze at when it comes on a body. In the case of Sunscourge Champion, this will give you 2 threats over the course of a game. Chance to gain 6 life in a game. And the second time it gives you a threat, it's actually a really fat threat. 4/4 is not bad either. And in the case of Shieldmare, this will sometimes help you race against mono red, especially in game 1 before they side in Glory Bringers and Chandras and scary stuff. This will help you win races, and if they want to, braid it or lightning strike it to make sure they don't lose that race, they still have to let you pull a little bit ahead there when they first remove it by letting you gain 3 more life. So Shieldmare is just ridiculous against mono red, again, especially game 1, and you want this around. But same thing with Sunscourge Champion. This is a good headache creature against both control and aggro. Again, if they want to make it soak up a lightning strike or an abrade, it will be back as soon as you draw a land or another junk card. And against control, same thing. They want to fatal push this or cast down or whatever, you can get it right out of your graveyard at a relatively low cost. But if we want creatures that gain us life, which is mostly what we're angling at here, then we should play the best creature that gains us life in Standard. And I think that's Lyra Donbringer, which we're going to make room for at least a couple of copies of. This gives us, along with Sunmare, like 6 5-mana threats at the very top end of the curve. Again, Lifegain decks don't usually get that kind of power at the top end. So if we can survive until the mid-game, which we can easily do because we're gaining life all game, then we can play a huge, dumb, fat threat and just take the game over. And Lyra's really good at doing that. Not only is this a finisher, but it's also a very often a life gain trigger, so it makes your Primates bigger. It attacks really well with a Famish Paladin, because it'll usually untap that Paladin. You know, if it attacks in, it'll get you a horse if you've got a Sunmare out. Nothing wrong with that. If you're attacking with a Lyra, you're doing well enough, but if you're getting, you know, angels off of it and horses off of it, and you can't win out from under that position, I don't know what to tell you. You should be able to win if Lyra is not only swinging through, but also getting you huge tokens. But to finish off the main deck here, I'm going to play 3 copies of a card that might actually surprise you, but stay open-minded, because I'm playing 3 copies of Pious Interdiction. And yeah, you could play Cast Out, you could play Ixalan's Binding in this slot. I wouldn't be mad at you, so don't be mad at me for playing Pious Interdiction, but this is just another great life gain trigger that sometimes does a pretty good impression of a Vraska's Contempt. And honestly, I shouldn't have to explain this too much. I just wanted this because it is obviously another life gain trigger. We have a piece of removal in this deck that not only neutralizes Rekindling Phoenix and other cards that are really good against us, but it also puts a counter on our Primate. You know, we can neutralize a threat on the other side of the board for pretty much the rest of the game, in most cases, especially game 1. And also, get a horse off of Crested Sunmare. That's an insane 2-for-1. So I love this card in this slot. It's going to be tough to convince me away from it. Now, we've got 25 lands in this deck, and yeah, I'm seriously playing Crypt of the Eternals. This is effectively a free life gain trigger. We don't have to pay any mana for it, you know, and we can grow our Primate or untap our Paladin or get a horse for literally no mana. There's nothing bad about that. One of the worst things that can happen in this deck is that we flood too much, or that we draw a land on turn 8 when we're really not looking for that. We want action off the top, and action usually means life gain triggers. So this is a way that you'll draw a land, and that's awesome. This makes it awesome to draw a land when usually it would really suck. So I like this. It gives us even more ways to draw life in this deck. And with cards like Sunmare and Ajani's Primate, you only have to gain the 1 life to get the trigger. So it's totally worth it. Now here's our board right now. We definitely play Authority of the Consuls while we still can. This is great against mono red decks, giving us even more of a leg up against them. But that's not all the 1-drops. We've also got the Legion's Landing in there, which will often come in against Control and other mid-range decks. Pretty much anything not playing Goblin Chainwhirler will try and make room for Legion's Landing in Game 2 and 3. This gets us lower to the ground, more aggressive, more life gain triggers, that's good. But the best part about the card is that it gives us eventual access to a Danto the First for it, which is great in long, grindy games, whether it's Control or mid-range. Invoke the Divine is even better out of our board than it is out of some boards, and we've seen it in standard sideboards already this season. It's decent at busting up Heart of Kirin, and it gains us a ton of life back, and that's where it's awesome in this deck. It's another life gain trigger. This plus Fountain of Renewal, that'll get us an Angel off of Resplendent Angel. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to play Invoke the Divine. Again, it's a fine sideboard option in pretty much any deck playing white, but in this deck, it's definitely going to be our Disenchanter of choice. You also see the Fumigate in the sideboard, which is relegated to the sideboard, but I do want to play some number of copies of it, because we tend to play through our own Fumigate at least somewhat well. You know, Sunscourge Champion can always Eternalize and come back after a Fumigate, and if we happen to have 2 Crested Sunmares out, well then look at that, all of our horses, including both Crested Sunmares, have Indestructible, and that's a really good way to play through a Fumigate. It's effectively a one-sided Wrath at that point. Plus it gains us life, so if any life gain trigger cards are still out after it resolves, helps with those too. You also see the approach of the Second Sun in there, which may look cute, but this is just good against pretty much any deck that's not aggro, you know, decks that are fast enough to kill us before we get to an approach. We don't want this in the main deck against, but I will put it in the sideboard against mid-range decks and even control decks that absolutely have to find the counterspell, or we're just going to kill them with an approach. This is another win condition, and in some ways amounts to a huge threat. But here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 66, which is actually pretty good for a life gain deck. Again, these are usually just thrown into the casual pile. We don't pay much attention to them. But in this case, again, we've got plenty of strong payoffs for gaining life in this format right now. And a lot of the cards that gain us life are at least creatures. Again, we can advance our board position. We can actually put bodies on the board that are relevant for blocking against aggro and extending the game until we get to our finishers, or for actually dealing damage against control decks that have to care when threats are on the table. And this all amounts to a deck that's actually really good almost no matter what it's playing against. I mean, it's a great F&M deck against mono red specifically, don't get me wrong, but even against control, mid-range, stomping and stuff like that, this deck has real game because it's got actual threats all up and down the curve. At the early game, we've got above curve stuff like Famish Paladin. Johnny's Primate is formidable, even if it only gets one counter. But when it starts getting any more, it's a really big creature. Plus, Resplendent Angel is even relatively low on the curve, and it's a threat that every deck in the format has to care about. But once we get up to, 5 mana, we've got fat threats to close out the game really easily. Crested Sunmare is a big creature, even if it never gets you a horse. But even if it gets you just one horse, that's a ton of value, and a bunch, that's 10 power. 5 of it's indestructible. Plus Resplendent Angel, again, talk about that. That's a huge threat that can close out a game. Plus we're playing Lyra Donbringer. So we've just got a bunch of stuff all up and down the curve that works really, really well. Again, almost no matter what's on the other side of the table. And that's really what makes this deck good, is that usually Lifegain is a pretty peaceful strategy. We've never seen a Lifegain deck that can hit like this. This thing hits hard, again, at all points on the curve, and it's got creatures the opponent has to care about all game. And once they're done, dealing with your 2-drops, then suddenly you're coming with 5-drops that are even worse. So this thing plays in a lot of ways like a mid-range deck with tons and tons of synergy, and even better game than most mid-range decks have against aggro. So try this thing out. I'm totally serious. It's worth the money, which isn't even that much. I know we're playing stuff like Resplendent Angel, we're playing Lyra Donbringer, even Crested Sunmare is like $4 a piece. But it turns out that even after all that money spent, the deck is only $125 on TCG Player right now, which, although it's not necessarily budget, is still way less than a ton of the other decks I've covered so far this season. So if you want to check out this deck list or play it for yourself, just click the first link in the description and that'll take you over to them boys at TCG Player. They do help sponsor my content, but they are, just factually, the cheapest place you're going to get this deck right now. So click that first link. But I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out for now. I hope you enjoyed it. I know a lot of you wanted to see that black splash so bad, but I really don't think it's the right way to go, at least so far. After rotation, we'll still have a bunch of viable Lifegain pieces in the format, but we'll lose Crested Sunmare. That's going to kind of be a bummer. So maybe then we can explore these black Lifegain payoffs. But as it is, I think this is the way to build the deck. But let me know how you object to that in the comments section. I'm always open. But if you will, on your way out, just do a couple of things for me. Like the video real quick, helps me out a bunch, and really doesn't take much effort on your part. Also, subscribe if you haven't done it yet. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Or if you'd like to help out around here and you got an extra $1 whole a month, then you might want to toss that into my Patreon, because if you do, I'll let you know what decks are coming the day before we do them, and you can participate in nifty polls to help me determine what decks to do in the first place. So if you want to do all those things, just throw $1 at my Patreon. I'll give you a link in the description for that too. But pretty sure I'm done for this one, so I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. And remember what it's all about. Spread love and be kind.
Yeah, just waking up can tell it's gonna be a great day. Look out my window, sun shining on the freeway. For one day I'm getting paid enough. I'm barely out of bed, I'm already blazing up. Feel like something in my soul is just raising up. I got a bounce in my step and I'm hanging tough. New persona, I'm hotter than Arizona. My aura corona, and I'll be sicker than pneumonia.